everybody, it's Christine of CraftyPaws. I'm here to share with you guys another Valentine's Day card that I've made with stamps that are not necessarily Valentine's Day themed. This one was made with an old set from Some Odd Girl called Winter Friends, and they no longer make this stamp set, but they do have the same stamped images available as digis, so I'll put a link in the description box below for that. But I made this card just kind of keeping it cutesy with some dies and some Copic coloring. So without further ado, this is the stamp set. And you can see they've got super cute little penguins and bears and accessories. And I am just coloring up the two little penguins. And one of them, I'm going to add that little bow that you see over to the left, so that the one on the left, the smaller one, is going to look like a little girl, whereas the other one will be like a little boy. I could have added a necktie, but since this is going to be for Mr. CraftyPaws and he doesn't really wear ties, I thought I would keep him just clean and simple. So as you can see, I'm starting with a cool gray, and I started with a fairly light one. It's a C3, and then I'm going to mark in where the darker areas are going to be with a C8. That's a really dark cool gray. And I'm just going to put the hints of where the shadows are with that cool gray and not color too much of the black areas of the penguin with that really dark cool gray, that C8, because I want to make sure that the images don't become too dark. I'm going to connect a little bit more, blending out with a C6 from that C8, and then I'm going to go back in with a C4 to try and connect the 6 down to where the 3 is. And so I think that C4 really connects nicely, and then I'm going to go back in at the end with the C3 just to keep those highlighted areas pretty light gray actually. But your eye is going to read that as being black when the entire image is colored up. And I did this because when you go really true dark black with images that are like this, that have a lot of surface area, kind of bigger spaces, it makes the images look less cute. Keeping them lighter, I think, keeps them looking super cute and cuddly. So again, I'm just going to lay in where the darkest shadows are going to be with that C8 all along the edges underneath the little fins, and then going back in with that C4 to connect with the C6 there. And again, you'll see that I'm keeping it fairly light, but I'm going back and forth to try and connect and bridge the color gap between the darkest C8 and the lightest C3. I'm adding in some C4 here, and I realize it's too stark a difference, so I need to add that C6, going back into the C4, and then to the lightest C3 there on the head. And I think keeping them this light really, like I said, keeps the card looking bright too. Going back in with that C6, that C4, that C3, and blending out again. And I could have done more tip-to-tip coloring, but I'm actually just blending in on the cardstock. Now for the white areas, I wanted to add like a blue tinge, kind of keeping the cool color tones going. So the shadowed areas I'm marking in with a B*0. It's really light, but you can still see that it adds a little bit of color and adds some areas of shading there. And I'm marking in around the eyes, underneath the beak, under the neck, under the little fins, where the feet meet, or where the legs meet. And now I'm putting in shadowed areas a little bit darker with that cool gray C1. So it's fairly light here. I wanted to keep the cheeks looking kind of popped up. And now I realize I need a little bit more contrast, so I'm going back into those shadowed areas with a C2. And I don't know, the eyes are looking a little squinty to me, so I'm going back in and adding the B*0 again, adding in some more shading. And it's looking a little kabuki-ish to me. And I also wanted to add just a hint of more color, so I'm adding that B32 just in the little nooks and crannies. And then I'm going back in and adding a C0. I probably could have gone to a C00, but it's okay. I think the rest of the card's colors, the saturation, is going to make this C0 look pretty bright. For the rosy cheeks, I'm using an R00, which again is very pale, but I wanted to make sure that the white areas of the penguin stay looking white, even though I'm using all these colors, the blue, the pink, the cool grays. At the end, you'll see it's going to look much more like the white parts of a penguin. I'm going to repeat the same process with the male penguin, starting in with the B00, trying to lay in where the kind of recessed areas would be, or the far away areas. So the area to the left of the beak, underneath the beak, around the eyes, those would be recessed. In the belly area, underneath that little mark of the chest, that would be a little recessed. Going in with the blue, that B32. And again, if you're interested in any of the Copic colors that I'm using, I always list my color choices in my blog post, which is linked in the description box below as well. This time I'm adding the darker shaded areas a little stronger in the male. I wanted him to look a little bit darker, a little stronger. So I'm adding that C2. And then blending out with a C1, and then going back in and blending out with that B00 again. And it almost looked like he has a mask on, but when this gets blended out, that C0, which again, I could have used a C00 there, it's going to look more white than it does right now. And I added the same R00 for the blush, and I'm going back in and adding the blue areas a little bit darker again in the male, and then going out with that C0 to blend out from the pink cheeks to the light blue areas. Now for the beak and the feet, I'm using a Y21 and a Y24 for shadow. And I'm making the dark areas to the right of that little female and male penguin. So you can see that the YR24 is over to the right and bottom. And then I thought I would use even more contrast and add a YR27, just in the little nooks and crannies to the right and underneath the open beak of the male. And then I'm going to go back in and blend out with that YR24, and then finally again with the Y21. And now for the inside tongue of the male, I used a R24. And then for the bow, I'm not going to worry too much about staying in the lines here, as you can see, because I'm going to fussy cut all of these images out. But I'm using a range of R's, R22, 24, 29, and then the deepest, the R39, just to make sure that the bow really looks like it has dimension. Now I'm using a Memento tuxedo black marker to ink all around the fussy cut images. I do that so that the white edges of the paper don't show up when I put them on the card. I think this is a nice finishing touch. Not everybody does this, but I think it really gives a finished professional look to the cards at the end. Now I'm going to glue on that little red bow onto the female penguin there. And I think the two look so cute there. You can see the finished card close-up picture here. Now to make the card front, I'm using a Lawn Fawn fancy scalloped rectangle die, and I've cut just on a scrap of white cardstock the edges there because I just want to make a border, and I'm going to use this fancy scallop circle die as a background for the penguins. And I used a Gina K large single stitch circle die for the inside setting. I could have left that pink, but I thought that the white would make the penguins pop a little more. And then, you know, that border, I wanted to cut the other side as well so that it looks like it's got scallops both at the top and the bottom. And I think that adds a really pretty cutesy border where the red cardstock base meets the patterned love cardstock of the background. And just to add a little bit more of a sharpness or crispness to that border, I'm adding a tiny thin strip of red cardstock down the center of that scalloped border. And I think that that looks so nicely finished. I'm just going to cut off the excess here with my guillotine cutter. And then you can see the finished card front, well, the bottom of the finished card front. And then I think I could have left it that way, but I thought to make the penguins pop more from that busy background, the love pattern background, adding this, circle, fancy scallop circle die background, and then the stitched circle center really kind of made the penguins pop better from that busy background. And to make it even pop more, I added double-sided foam dots to the backs of both of the penguins so that they're raised up, and it adds a little dimension and a little interest. And when someone receives a card that is popped up like this, I think, non-card makers think that's so cool. For the little heart that I wanted to add into the hand of the male penguin, I used just the accompanying die set from the Lawn Fawn Hello Baby to cut that little red heart out and glued that into place. And then just to add a little sparkle and interest to that heart that he's giving to his mate, I added some hibiscus pink stickles, and I think that adds a really cute added dimension as well as sparkle to this card, which I think is so sweet. And I let this stickles dry overnight because I put such a heavy coat on, and it really ties in the pink of the background circle to the little heart that he's holding. For the sentiment, I'm using my EK powder tool to make sure there's no static, and I'm using Versa Mark ink to stamp out that sentiment from that stamp set that says "Melt My Heart." And I'm using a Versamark pen to just write in the U. And I don't mind that it's super thick because it kind of balances out that thick heart. And I'm using a Versa marker to kind of emphasize that thick U and the heart. And then I'm going to use Superfine Ranger embossing powder in white. And I'm collecting the excess in that coffee filter to pour back into my embossing powder jar. Then I'm going to take a fine paintbrush, just a dry paintbrush, to get off some of the excess. I'm not sure why. Even though I use that powder tool, it looks like I got some excess there. And now I'm using my heat tool just to heat up the sentiment. I'm doing the front and the back because if you tend to just use the heat tool on one side, it will make the cardstock curl. And because there's some areas that got kind of less coverage, I'm using my Signo Uniball white gel pen to kind of outline the sentiment. And it makes it really crisp and complete rather than kind of the spotty coverage that I got with just the embossing powder. And then this is just the inside. I had a scrap of that love pattern paper left over and obviously some more of that red cardstock. And I'm just going to add this to the kind of 1/3 bottom part of the inside liner. And I think that will just give a nice finished look to the inside of the card as well. I put that into place and I have plenty of room still for my sentiment. And that is the finished card. I hope you've enjoyed this process video as much as I enjoyed making it for you guys. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day. Bye.